Greetings, everybody. This is Verona from Ancestral Voices doing another Ancestral Voices live. Today, we are joined with diviner, healer, and medium Seah Wraye. So, Seah, welcome to Ancestral Voices.
Thank you, V. Thank you so much. It's such an honor, truly.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So, I've known Seah now so I was just trying to think about this. And have I known you for like 3 or 4 years
Three,
now?
yeah, I think maybe three, something like that. I'm terrible with time.
No,
So,
me too, me too. And then I just thought to myself, because number one, the reason why you're here today is because we recently had a reading, and you've always fascinated me as a person. I've always known you've been very like spiritually gifted and in tune and so forth. But after this reading, I was like, do you know what? I'm gonna have to interview you properly and just ask some of the questions that we've never even had after all this time. So
yeah.
this conversation, even though it's me and Cia, we have a whole audience listening. So feel free to join in this discussion. But Seah Wraye, I generally want to ask you about your spiritual journey and how it started, because I know you've gone in to explore a range of traditions. So I want to hear about your story and then we can go on from there.
That's quite interesting. It's always an interesting question to be asked because the journey for me feels like it's always been, you know, um, I've always ever since been a child, for as long as I know myself, basically. Um, I've felt more comfortable in that with that other place. I've never quite gotten the workings of this place. Um, and actually, recently I was moved to write this, which I moved to read. Shortly after I wrote it, I heard read it at the beginning of this interview. So I will. It may be a bit lengthy, but hey, me
Go
just
ahead.
have to follow the spirit. I have no name for what I am, so call me what you may. The fiery blood of old wars and ancient warriors coursed forcefully through my heart and veins. The weighted crowns of ancient sages rest within and upon my brow. The wildness of women who know and thrive in their prowess bubbles incessantly at my base. I inhabit times and spaces in various realities, and most find hard to relate. I inspire, yet am often uninspired in a box of blues where it's rare I find a muse. I mostly live in silence with mountains of solitude, yet my wild, hot blooded sexiousness demands sating, outlet, and ceaselessly celebrates its copious altitudes. I have no name for what I am, so call me what you may. I see from behind my eyes and witness inside rooms and bodies at times. I hear invocations echo to me from beyond great voids. I step voluntarily and involuntarily forth and back across timelines. I meet and ride mermaids and seamen here, yes, and in other times. I am Maroon, Lebanese, Jamaican, Nigerian, Irish, Scottish, Egyptian, Italian, British, Atlantean, primordial. I utter languages alien to my mind and unfamiliar to my tongue. I know of things foreign to my mind. I speak of things merely being echoed through me from a vast divine. I have no name for what I am, so call me what you may.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And so you said you wrote this just today.
No, like I don't know,
Okay.
2 maybe 3 weeks ago.
And then Spirit told you
And
just
then yeah, it just came up. It just came. Um, so in answer to your question, I just follow the call of my spirit, the call of my soul, my inner compass, um, and allow it to guide me where it has and where it may, you know. Um, and I learn and remember as I go. A lot of my knowings, I suppose. A lot of even my practices come directly, like I get a pull to do something, and then I learned that it is a thing that has been done for millennia, you know? Yeah, so it's, I can't say when it began. It began before I came in here.
So, so would you say then, like throughout your childhood,
Yeah.
were you having spiritual experiences then, like seeing things? Did it start from a very, very young age then?
So I don't see like people standing here in front in this, dimension.
Mm-hmm.
I see, it's like I see them in the back of my head somehow. That's the best way I can describe it. And as a child, I used to wake up most nights. To me, it feels like every night in the wee hours of the night, and I'd wake up just terrified, just sweating and wanting comfort, wanting, because I'd wake up and I'd see all these people, and not just people, energy beings, just the room and the house would just feel full.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up in a Catholic household, so I there was not, my parents weren't into spirit, or my grandparents weren't into spirit. Um, so they'd be like, oh, nothing don't name Duppy, you know. However, bless her, my helper, Miss Elvis, who I grew up with, she would walk and talk to them everywhere. She would just be in conversation. So I was able to share and talk to her about spirit. Um, I would have a strong sense or knowing about people. If somebody wasn't good for me or good for somebody else around me, in terms of my family, yeah, I'd know.
Mm-hmm.
And I had an experience with a kitten. Well, I think I was about 8, and the kitten was just born that day and had an accident, and I had a real, I don't know, I felt like I could save this kitten. And so I sat with it, and the rest of my household was laughing at me, because they're like, what you doing, this little kitten, it's not going to survive. But I was with the kitten,
Mm-hmm.
and there were times when it became more alive, but eventually it went. But even so, I knew that there was, it's like I could see inside the kitten. It's like I knew that there was something that could be done. So I did what I did. Yeah. So there's, in terms of my seeing, is more a knowing and a sense, and the children running around, it made no sense to me. I was like, why do I want to run around and get sweaty? And I didn't find that fun. I was interested in hearing adults conversation and talking with adults, because I'd hear and I'd know what they should do. I'd have a feeling, but of course, you know what it's like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Go find something to do. Big people.
So I want to ask you, you mentioned you grew up in a Catholic household and then you're growing up in Jamaica, and I know what that's like. It's very religious over there. How was that for you in your journey of spirituality? Did you feel that it was frowned upon? How did you break out of that, or what was your experience like?
Well, I don't feel like I was ever really a part of it. Um, So yes, I'd go to church with my grandmother most Sundays. Um, and I'd look around thinking, why all these big people looking so intently and listening so intently, like they think God is so small. God not so small, you know. Um, so I would just be there. I would just be in church, not participating, not really, Then I was made to do first communion, which again has like, so I need to say to somebody, to tell somebody the things that I've done so that they can talk to God. That's just, it's just mad. It's just crazy to me. This is, as a child. So I didn't feel like there was anything to break out of. I also went to an all girls Catholic school. But again, however, that brings me to say, I quite often feel like I am in the world, but not really of it. So it's like I was a lot like an observer, especially as a child. So if something didn't resonate or didn't, then I, yeah, I asked my mother what I was like, as a little, and she said bored. She said bored. You'd always say you're bored, because I didn't have many people to relate to other. So yes, it
So
was.
then, so go ahead.
No, that's it really.
So I was going to say, so at what stage in your life path did you start to get more active in your spiritual development then?
I suppose that, interesting. More active, okay, more active. That was probably 17 years, 2004. How long ago was that? I have no idea. Around that time, when there was I had I was at a real crossroads, and there was crisis, and I had to, it was like I need to go on a journey, and like my world fell apart, um I had, my children were quite young at that time, but I just had to go. I had to listen. I had to follow spirit. So yes, I did raise them. They were, I lived with them, but my ex-husband and I broke up, um, and it was such an emotionally overwhelming time, that, and lonely, because again, there wasn't anyone around really that could relate to what I was experiencing. And I just kept being drawn to come out of the house, just to go. So I'd go for walks in the woods, and I'd go and park up at night. Thankfully, I live in the countryside, so there are lots of green spaces. So I would go and park up and sit for hours, just listening to the breeze, just being with myself. Um, and I suppose during those times, that connection with, well, my connection with soul started to strengthen. I was making a very unpopular choice, and I had to find resolve within myself, because it wasn't just for the sake of doing, or just for the sake of going. you know Anybody who knows that pull can understand, knows that it is between life and death. It is between living, truly living, not just existing or conforming just to exist, you know, and sacrificing passion, which is life force, which is, you know, fire. So for me, yeah,
Okay.
it's and you know, that's whenever I get asked that and I think back, yeah, that would have to be the most poignant time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And where did I go from there? What was the trajectory like?
Mm-hmm.
That too is hard to describe because, like I said, a lot of it occurs in here, you know. Um, I'd be drawn to do, actually, it was around that time, maybe a year or so after I had gone to Cornwall and walking past this place, and I saw what was it? What was it? A past life regression. Um, a therapist who did past life regressions, and it was just that, you know, a little notice in our window, and immediately I was like, oh my gosh, I'm only here for 2 days. I wonder if I can get an appointment. And of course, lo and behold, I was able to.
Wow.
And I mean, during that session, the times that I was shown, the lifetimes that I was shown, and the insights that were shared with the facilitator just resonated, you know,
Mm-hmm.
um, and joined the dots for me without trying to get into too many of the details. I was taken to, um, I was shown a lifetime where I was inside a cave and living with other families inside a cave. And I was really old. I was shown the two extremes of this lifetime as a child and um, as an a really old woman. And after that session, when I went to Jamaica, I asked my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, um, if my if her mother had been a healer, because in this cave people were coming to me, you know, like a family would come to me with their child, and I was making poultices and mixtures for the child. And for some reason, because I hadn't known much about my great grandmother, and so I asked my grandma. Like I said, she was Catholic. So she was like, well, yes, I suppose so. You can call it that. You know, people would, when people weren't well in the community, them would come to her and she would give them things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and later on, much later on, I came to learn that her that my grandmother was a Maroon, and her parents, you know, were Maroons. And I was told by my aunt that my great grandfather, so my grandma's father, had been a Maroon colonel, but
Wow.
it didn't, there's not a lot of information um, about that. So, yeah, so there was that session, the workshop, and then I went back to Cornwall to this teacher facilitator. She's awesome, Eloa. And I did a channeling workshop, and well, I'd never done anything like that before,
Okay.
but it was so powerful. Um, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to share the details. I'm like, I can't. All right. Let's just say the spirit, when the spirit arrived and landed in me, the whole, I mean, it just translated into huge sexual energy. It was a workshop of about, I think, maybe 8 other women. And the facilitator interviewed the spirit, and she asked who she was. She asked who she was, and she said she's an ancestor. She came forth, I should say, in full white, head wrapped in white, preceded by a band of about 13 male African warrior drummers coming out of a forest, and just landed. It was just potent. And when I came out of that, when, I stopped channeling, I commented on just how I had to literally shift in my seat, because it was like, what? And the room, the whole room laughed. They were like, yes, we felt that. All of us felt that, And it just speaks to, for me, that just speaks to the power that we carry, the latent power that we carry. Because we're speaking of ancestral power, ancestral energy, when allowed the window, given the opportunity to visit and to land, can effect so much healing, just by its presence.